right, it's 10:02. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eddie Landeros. I am an assistant professor for San Diego Mesa College in the School of Business and Technology. So I teach business and accounting courses. I also lead the entrepreneurship program and the real estate program at Mesa College. So this is a perfect event for me because we're going to cover entrepreneurship, and we have a panelist that's going to speak on real estate as well. So I want to welcome you, all of you, to this wonderful event. It's one of the last few events that promote Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinx Heritage Month. Every year in September and part of October, we celebrate the Hispanic culture. So with that, I want to introduce all of you to our panelists. We have three great panelists, business owners, Marilu Avila, Fred Hetter, and Jorge Estrella. I'm going to read their bio, and then I'm gonna start asking questions. So very similar to a presidential debate, I'll just ask a question, but it's not a debate, guys. Don't get nervous. It's just a question, and then I'll let each of them answer the question. I personally think it's very important to listen to successful business owners, whether they're Hispanic, white, Black. I think it's important. You know, one of the reasons why I started teaching and I became a consultant is because throughout my career, and I spent a lot of years in banking and a couple of years working for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, I dealt with hundreds of businesses. And one of the things that I learned was that, you know, you could, especially like during the recession in 2008 and 2009, where you could see somebody in the same industry, in the same region, with the same background, not succeed. And you would compare that person to another person in the same situation, and they would succeed. So it all came down to business principles, to learning and knowing how to successfully manage a business. So every opportunity I have to listen to successful business owners, I'm going to take it because I learn a lot. Myself, I'm a business owner myself. I've had my own consulting company for about 10 years. You know, and that's helped me teach, because I couldn't teach without my consulting work. So it's important to hear, you know, the stories that these individuals have. So with that, I'm gonna introduce them, and then we'll get started. Before I start, I wanna allow Sean Fawcett. She works with Work-Based Learning, one of my colleagues, and she's helped me a lot through with this event. Sean, you wanted to say something about logistics?
Yes, briefly. Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Fawcett. I'm one of the work-based learning coordinators at Mesa College. Thank you so much for our panelists to be here today to share their expertise and experience. We appreciate that. Just a few housekeeping items. All of you should be unmuted upon entry. If for some reason you get unmuted, please make sure to mute yourself. We have also disabled the chat. So in order for us to monitor the questions, please go ahead and ask your questions via chat. They'll come directly to me, and then I'll share those with the panelists as well as Professor Landeros as our moderator. Other than that, I have submitted a Google form in the chat. Please make sure to sign in so that we can track attendance for this event. But most importantly, if you are getting extra credit from one of your faculty for participating in this activity, you do need to make sure you fill in that Google form. And then at the end of the event, we'll also have a quick survey that I'll send out as well, but I'll share that in the chat with you too. Thank you so much, and enjoy the event.
Thank you, Sean. So I'm going to read the bios right off the paper that I have here, just so I don't make any errors. So we're going to start with Marilu Avila. Hi, Marilu.
Hi.
Marilu currently owns and operates Design Square, an interior design and general construction company in San Diego, California, and Chula Vista since 2004. She is a senior interior designer for the company and graduated from the Design Institute of San Diego with a bachelor's degree in interior design. She has been in business for 16 years and is very proud to work with multi-million-dollar projects along with architects and designers in the region. Fred? Hey, Fred.
Hello.
Fred currently owns and operates a State Farm agency in Chula Vista, California. Prior to starting with State Farm, he worked in various industries until he decided to invest time and energy in the insurance industry. He received a marketing degree from the University of Phoenix and has gained knowledge and experience in the industry since starting his career as a State Farm agent in 2002. Jorge, morning, George.
Morning, everyone.
Jorge currently owns and operates a real estate brokerage firm in Chula Vista since 2006. He supervises dozens of real estate agents and has been working in the industry for about 20 years. Aside from real estate, he was also the COO for a multi-million-dollar bail bond company in Southern California and owned and operated a telecommunications company with operations in Latin America in the late 90s. He currently holds several licenses in the industry and attended SDSU and Southwestern College. Welcome, everyone. So again, this is a very casual conversation, nothing formal. So I'm going to start with the first question. So the first question is, tell us about yourself and your background. How did you decide to become an entrepreneur and how did you get started? We're gonna get started with Marilu. Marilu, tell us how you got started. What made you decide how to be a business, what made you decide to become a business owner? I've known you for a long time, and I know that your dad also owns a company. Her dad owns a carpeting company, and it would have been very easy for her to just work for her dad, right? But she decided to still go to school, get her degree, and start her own business. Can you tell us about that, Marilu?
Yes, I mean, I started helping my father in his business since I was 12 years old, and at that point, I knew I wanted to do something similar in the business, but I didn't want to be selling carpets. So I started, studying interior design. And in my last year, I started doing my internship for an architectural firm called Interior Architecture. I started there as a librarian and worked my way out until I was able to manage their company. I worked there for 6 years. And then after the 6 years, I told them I was ready to open my own business. I learned a lot at school, but I did learn a lot from them. And that's how I started. In 2004, we opened Design Square, and it's been a challenge. It hasn't been easy, but it's always something that you learn and keep you up to, go to your next step.
And you bring up a good point, because a lot of students don't want to work for another company. They just want to go straight and do their own business. But I always recommend, you have to get a couple years, working for another firm or another company to get that knowledge, to see how others work before you get. I mean, I always recommend that. It's not a must. But, I always think that it's good. Did it help you, Marilu? I'm sure it did, right?
Yeah. And it's very different to work with someone in your family to work from somebody else, because I think one of the main reasons is you need to follow directions, you need to follow instruction, and, you cannot tell them how to do the things unless you know how to do them. So.
Sure. Definitely. Fred, you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning, all. Thank you all for your time, and glad to be a part of this. Eddie, appreciate the invite. Let me kind of read the question again. So about myself. So I was born here in San Diego, and my mother is a first-generation immigrant. She came in the '60s and worked in factories in Los Angeles, and married my father in '73 or so, and so I was born in '75. So I'm half Mexican, half Swedish, which is an interesting combination, not very common in Southern California, and much less in South San Diego, which is where I grew up. The reason I share this with you is there were a lot of obstacles growing up. I was never part of one group or the other, and so that kind of always put me in an odd position. But I did know that I didn't like where I was at, and I wanted to be somewhere else. So early on, there used to be a packaging place where they would package cucumbers and avocados, and I used to go door to door since I was a kid, selling predominantly South San Diego and San Isidro areas. And that I was doing since I was about 8 or 9. That was kind of encouraged by my mother, and from then on I would paint houses or doors, and so somehow there was always a fire to just do something else. It I mean, I remember driving at 14 or 15 with a couple of friends up to Ventura. We would buy blankets in Tijuana and sell them up there because we have a lot of growing Hispanic segment over there, and there was a need. The reason I share that is I didn't really know what I was doing, but I would try and identify a gap, and if there was some sort of margin for profit, I'd give it a shot. Then as I went through high school, I ended up getting somewhat of a scholarship for a university in Texas called St. Mary's, very good Catholic school. I didn't last much though. Culture shock, ex-girlfriend, bunch of things, came back to the States, and I really struggled to get a degree. So as I tried to get a business going, buying and selling cars, I still knew I had to get a degree. And the reason I share this is you hear a lot of stories, especially a lot of students, that some of these people are very successful entrepreneurs and they dropped out of college or they didn't go. Well, I'll tell you my story. I had that fire, but I couldn't find the niche. So I struggled, got the degree at 25, and I went to 3 different schools. University of San Diego, which obviously I accumulated a lot of debt. St. Mary's University. I did not attend. I attended 1 class in Mesa, 2 or 3 in Grossmont, Southwestern, San Diego State, and finally bundled it all up at University of Phoenix and got 2 degrees out of them within 9 months because I had so many units. So that's the reason I say that is there's one thing you have to think about if you're considering being an entrepreneur, and the word to me in Spanish makes sense. It's called ganas. In English, it translates to drive. And that's one thing that, I'm not trying to be religious, but there's a saying, you cannot put in someone what God left out. So if you don't have fire or drive, there are a lot of jobs out there that'll give you a 9 to 5, you'll live a good life, and that's that. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need a little bit of everything. But I just wanted to kind of share that what got me to where I got, becoming a State Farm agent, was really drive. One incident really kind of made me decide I could not work for someone. So I worked at Lens Crafters, and I was making glasses. And 2 months before Mother's Day, Mexican Mother's Day, I asked for that day off. And the Friday before, the manager decided he was going to make a mandatory meeting that day. And I did not show up. And so when I got back on Monday, I was getting written up, and immediately I resigned. And so that's kind of what transitioned out of me. And I knew I had to plow through with a degree and open up my own business. And it had nothing to do with them. I'm sure they had a very intelligent and there was a well thought out agenda, but there was no multicultural business acumen. I share that with you because some of these questions has to do with understanding the markets. And there are 2 things I think are really critical. One is multicultural business acumen. The other one is drive. If you can play with those 2, I think it's a route you can all proceed and go. Did I say more than anything?
I think you bring up a good point. Like when I started out my career, I got my degree and started working in the nonprofit sector. Then I got into banking, and to me, a frustration that I always had as an employee was the fact that they weren't promoting me fast enough. Like you said, I always had that, in Spanish, is el gusanito, no? El gusanito of trying to be a business owner, of trying to succeed. And to me, that was always very frustrating that I could see somebody get promoted. But for them to get promoted, I mean, they had to have been there like 3 to 5 years before they got promoted. And for me, that was very frustrating. So that's one of the reasons why I sort of started doing things on my own, started opening businesses and so forth. So thank you, Fred. George, same question. Tell us about yourself and your background, and how did you decide to become an entrepreneur? How did you get started?
Good morning, everyone. Eddie, thank you for having me as well. This is pretty exciting to share our experiences with all of you. I'm going to echo a lot of what Fred said, and also what you've been saying as well, Eddie. What's funny is, growing up, I did very similar things such as Fred did, right? I did odd jobs, I bought and I resold things in my younger 10, 11, 13 years old or whatever. What's funny is that at 20, I think, at 20 years old, I got a part-time job at a long-distance telephone company. And back then, telephone companies were pretty big. It was back like in 93 or something like that, 94. And I started doing okay. I remember I started as a telemarketer. And which is an important point because as an entrepreneur, you'll notice that you'll end up selling something, right? Whether it's a product, whether it's your services, whether it's your consulting firm, whatever it is, ultimately you're going to get in front of somebody and sell your product, which is you. At any rate, I started doing telemarketing. I did fairly well. I started going up in the ranks at that company. Then I became a supervisor, a manager, et cetera, and I became pretty close with the ownership of the company. Back then it was a, I don't know, about 1,000 employee company. It was multi-billion dollars. It was doing fairly well. So to gravitate towards the ownership was a pretty big thing back then, especially at the age of 21, I believe. And I did that for a reason. I did that because I wanted to emulate whatever they were doing back then. I wanted to see what things I could pick up and apply to my way of life or my way of living, right? What's funny is that I think at the age of 22 years old, I was excited because I just became manager of this service department. I was overseeing about 100 people. And I thought I was big back then, right? And I got a raise, I remember. I think I got a raise of like $2 and I was ecstatic. I think I was making $16 an hour back then, which wasn't bad back in 1994. Probably not bad now, to be honest with you.
You're telling your age, George.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was fine. And I got really excited. The first thing I did was go out and buy a small BMW, right? I thought I was really cool and excited. I drove up to the company and the ownership, the main owner comes out and he congratulates me on my car. And I tell him, you know what? I really want to have a car like yours one day. And he had this huge, big Ferrari or something like that. And he says, oh, you can't have one of those. And I thought it was a little cold. I thought it was cold. And he kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. Mind, I'm 21. And I'm like, why is that? He's like, because you're a wage earner. Wage earner? What's a wage earner? Well, you work for your wages. That's good. Keep on doing what you're doing. But in order for you to buy a car like mine or to grow in what you want to do, because I can see what you're trying to do, he's like, you need to be on commissions. And it never hit me. I was 21 years old, like commissions. But I'm working hard. I'm working 12 hours a day. I'm getting there at 6 in the morning. I'm doing all the reports. I'm doing all these things. And I realized what he told me. He basically told me that no matter what I did, even if I got a $10 wage, it was never going to be enough because it was always going to be that limit. So then I thought, wait a minute. So no matter what I do, I'm always going to get an hourly wage. That's not good enough. I need to be able to put an unlimited amount of potential and income of whatever I want to do. And I think at that moment is when specifically that day, I realized that I wanted to go into business by myself. And I agree with what the panel has been saying thus far, by the way. I think it's important that we start somewhere. You know, I think right now on social media, there's a lot of these rich, quick get schemes where we can become influencers or whatever. And that's all nice. And for some people it works, but I think the reality is that we actually do need to learn something and learn off our managers, learn off our peers, start somewhere. Once you start somewhere, you'll be able to understand what your personal niche is and just pick and choose what things fit your personality. And I think once you do that, you'll start venturing into other things. Anyways, that kind of gives you an info.
Thank you, George. Marilu, you mentioned that it hasn't been easy. Not too long ago, I read somewhere that failure is the best university education that you can get. You know, I think it's very important to fail. I failed. You know, I've had 6 different businesses, and I think I failed half of them. But I think it's important. You know, you learn a lot from these instances. What would you say are the pros and cons of working for yourself? What do you like and what don't you like?
Yes, I think it, you know, has, as you mentioned, it hasn't been easy, but as you said, you always try something different. When we started in 2004, we started just with the division of interior design. And then we wanted to bring something to sell to the public. We decided to go in selling tile, and we got a lot of storage, and that didn't work out because there was so much competition. And then in 2008, we get our general contractor's license and we decide to go on different directions. So we have been changing directions within the same business, but it is important to always try. You know, in order to succeed, you always have to renovate. And then at some point, you are looking that something is not making you make money, then you have to change the direction or change the business or do something about it. I think the main reason for you to succeed is to risk, because you always have to risk in order to win something, but take the time to analyze what you're doing, because it can go, time goes very fast. If you don't stop at any point and say, okay, this is what is working on, this is what is not working, then you're probably gonna fail. Now, for me, the pros of being, have my own business, you have a lot of flexibility. You don't have a limit in what you can make, you know, economically, because there's no limit. You know, you can have as much as you want if you work hard. Now, the cons is, it's not that you have a schedule from 9 to 5. When you own your own business, sometimes even on the weekends, you are worried about what's going on. And if I get an email, even if it's on a Sunday, of people that wanted to place an order or give me a job, I'm gonna take the call. I'm gonna, you know, I don't mind if I'm gonna make a good profit over there. I won't have a time frame or a stopping point to make business. So I think that's, you know, there's people for everything, and there's, as they said, there's nothing wrong, you know, for working in a company from 9 to 5. That's perfectly. But I think for myself, I don't like that. I like to be on my own schedule. I want to be able to create. I want to have that flexibility. And that's why we're here.
And one of the things that I think that I like about your business, Marilu, is that you have, I mean, you could have a remodeling business where you sell, you know, you sell tile and you sell carpet and you sell other stuff, but you kind of go after big projects, which is, you know, I think as a business owner, you shouldn't be afraid to go for the big contracts or the big, you know, and, you know, once you get into the bidding world, you know, once you know how to bid and you start looking into procurement opportunities, there's a lot of procurement opportunities out there, especially if you're a minority. If you want to do business with public entities like the city of San Diego, the port, the school districts, the college, these are all government entities who by law have to set aside funds to share with minorities. And that includes Hispanics, African Americans, women-owned companies. Like there's a big pot out there that a lot of companies don't know that exists. And I think Marilu, I think you've done a good job in bidding and going after those contracts. Fred, what about you? Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. It's interesting when I heard about taking that call on a Sunday. So I started as a firm agent in 2002, and you know, I had a wife and I had a child, and we were broke. And my child was maybe 3 years old, and when my child was born, I had $20 to my name. So that kind of shares a little bit of kind of what had played out. Some maybe being a little over aggressive and having a young family, I guess. But when I opened shop, I took out, I bought a little house, real small little house when I was real young, and I took out pretty much all the equity that was there, and I think it was about $55,000 or $65,000, and I put it in a bank account to open my business, and I knew I needed to have at least $50,000 in cash. So in an 18-year period, so I started in the middle of the year, so that's 6 months, and the next year, with a wife and a child, I netted $14,500. So that kind of gives you a perspective of how bad things can get and how the decisions you make have a direct correlation or an impact to results. It was very scary. and I was taking every call and I was doing everything. I mean, I remember I gained like 30 pounds in 18 months. So high stress, low income, and coming home to a child that needs to be fed and needs to go to college and all that good stuff. But I understood. It's interesting because either you have it or you don't. I understood. I felt that it was headed in a direction. And my business is made of renewals. So 80% of my income is based on renewals. So you buy your auto insurance with me, and most clients stay at an average of 20 to 30 years. So I get that income for the next 20 to 30 years. But in the beginning stages, it's very slow and it's very expensive to bring business in. And so everything I did, I ran at a loss, which I strongly recommend anybody here listening, figure out how to become profitable immediately. Don't focus on making a lot of money, but at least get into the black, get away from the red. And the second year, my income went up to about $78,000 or $88,000. So you could see that shift. The pros of that is that you once you find some sort of a rhythm and you figure out how to manage your personal life, I noticed I took less calls, but I was more effective in my conversations with clients, where I wasn't really doing the Sunday calls after about 2 years of running the rat race and not making money. So you kind of want to figure out how to streamline, and that yielded immediate results. And once I kind of figured that part, the income kind of kept coming up, and I still gained some more weight, but the income still, it started, you started getting more in the black. The pros is the numbers started to make sense. The cons, I mean, I could have lost a marriage, right? I could have been a single dad, potentially health concerns with the bad eating habits, the habits that I was picking up. Those things are very scary. And the one thing I will also say is Uncle Sam is very interesting. And when you go from W-2 to self-employed, it's completely different. And so just keep early on, get yourself some sort of mentorships. I think that played a big part in me, being able to get out of the red. The other part, the taxes was a big one. So I ended up with a really bad bill, yet I didn't have much income. And so those were scary as heck, man, very scary. My regret, or what I ended up learning after a couple years into it, is you've got to get yourself good mentors. And here's what I mean by a good mentor. It's not the aunt that you love and says everything you do is great. That's not a good mentor. That is actually it's opposite of a good mentor. You need to find someone that is very clear, that's going to probably tick you off 9 times out of 10, and is willing to take your call a few days later when you call to apologize for giving so much attitude on the conversation. And when you find that type of a relationship with 1 or 2 or 3 individuals, I don't think there's anything out there, any one of you, how many are you, like 30, 40 students, will not succeed. If you have good mentorship, you will do well. But you have to have some trust too. You have to trust in the mentor. Trust, once you pick them and you know they're good, trust their guidance. Because most mentors, your success is more important to them than sometimes even yourself.
Yeah.
So
and I would say like I've had good mentors. I think that's helped me tremendously. I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 12, and I came from Tijuana, and I didn't know very much English. And my parents wanted to help. I mean, my mom was a teacher, but she was a teacher in Mexico, so she didn't know anything about SATs. She didn't know anything about the difference between SDSU and UC, what type of units, nothing. So I was kind of on my own. And all I got from my mom was, you got to go to college. I don't care what you do, you just got to go to college. And it's like Fred said, I mean, it's looking for those mentors. And I always tell my students, like, look at me as a mentor. I'm teaching not because of the money. I'm teaching because I have a passion for it, and because I like to talk to students and I like to help them. If you have questions, if you need guidance, you can always come to me. But if you don't feel comfortable with me, you can go to another professor, you can go to another person. It's very important. to have that person that can say, you know what, maybe that's not the right route for you. You know what, that email you wrote, you know, it's got a bunch of spelling or errors and grammar errors. Write it again. You know, like Fred said, your mom or your aunt or your uncle is not gonna say that. They're not gonna want to hurt your feelings. So thanks,
Or they
Fred.
don't know, or they're not the right mentor for that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the other,
What about you, George?
You know what? I'm going to echo a lot what you said in the beginning. I think there's obviously the pros and cons. The alternative, though, is what is the pros and cons to working for somebody else for the rest of your life, right? I mean, about those limits that we spoke about. Clearly, the cons are that when you work for yourself, if you don't generate revenue, then you don't eat. And that's obviously a problem. But the pros, I should say, are limitless in every way, shape, and form. Limitless with time, economically as well. The sky's the limit for many things. One of the things that I do personally, I end up talking to myself a lot. I'm very judgmental on my own self. I correct myself a lot. And I think as an entrepreneur, to a certain extent, you have to be ready or almost think as if someone's trying to take your client away. And once you realize that there's another competitor, because there always is, trying to take your client away or bidding for that contract that we're trying to obtain, you'll put a lot of work ethic in the project that you're working on. One of the things that Professor Landeros mentioned right now also as well is the fact that, I lost my train of thought, the fact that we shouldn't be afraid of going for that bigger project, right? I remember when I first started, one of my mentors back then, I started in real estate. I was afraid or embarrassed to ask for the deal. As real estate agents, by the way, when you start out, one of the ways you acquire new clients is by doing open houses. A lot of people believe that open houses are being held to sell that specific house, when in reality, open houses is just a way for the agent to acquire new clients and literally try to get clients off the street. Because typically, whoever's looking at an open house is probably shopping or considering and buying a house, or at least thinking about it or whatnot. So whoever's walking in the door is doing this all day long on a Saturday or on a Sunday or whatever. So the open houses are for that, obviously. And one time, one of the mentors that I had said, you know what, why don't you try something different? The next time somebody walks in the door, and if they don't want to buy that house, which usually they don't, ask them, can I be your agent moving forward on any other house you buy? Can I start helping you? Because most of the agents that they actually encounter with, they're trying to show off the house or whatever they're trying to do. But nobody will really ask the client, hey, can I be your agent? Can I be the one to represent you? Can I be the one to facilitate the process? And I started doing that, and it started working like a charm. I would say 75% of the time, the clients were kind of taken back and be like, sure, I don't have an agent. And that's how I started growing my business. And there's obviously a lot of other aspects to growing your business, a lot of pros and cons, but I think that's just one piece of the aspect of is actually not being afraid to fail. I think as young students, you guys are in a position right now to, I think Will Smith said this, right? Fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. That puts you in a great position because right now you can afford to try different things. You can afford to try, working at a job or to start a new career. If it didn't work out, fine. Learn a couple of things off that business and apply it towards your next job or your next entrepreneurship. But I think failing is definitely something part of business. I mean, I'm sure we've all done it before. And as long as we learn from it, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah.
Good. Thank you, George. I'm going to skip a question because we're running out of time. But, when I was growing up, my mom used to give me a hard time sometimes because I mixed Spanish and English. And she would say, like, speak Spanish, you're not, don't forget Spanish. How has that helped you in your careers? We're going to start with you, Marilu. How is, because I know all of you speak Spanish. Do you consider that an asset? Has it helped you in your business?
Yes, definitely. And I can tell you right now that on the residential side of my business, 75 or 80% of my clients are Hispanics. And especially in this type of business, your clients becomes your friends and friends becomes family, and you create that relation. And it's always important to have that relation that you can understand, as another person mentioned before, if it's Mother's Day, if it's, the grandma. By our culture, we have different priorities as, as other cultures. So I think it helped me a lot, and it gives me that flexibility that I can go with a client, even with our sales reps. Some of our sales reps speaks English and some of them speak Spanish, and we always have that chemistry, to make jokes, to get better pricing, because you have that connection with them. So it definitely helped me a lot. I had to learn English. I had to be able to communicate in English also. But for me, Spanish has been my main language with most of my clients.
Good. What about you, Fred?
Well, I want to take a step back. There's nothing better than an educated Hispanic, and there's nothing better than an educated female Hispanic. And there's a lot of reason behind that. We have different migration patterns and reasoning as to why. But if you look at some of your relatives that are still in Mexico, I bet you a lot of them that are doing well are highly educated. And when we transition to this country, sometimes some of us get stuck in limbo, or we start making a good hourly wage, or some selling and making more money than our neighbor or whoever, whatever we compare ourselves, that we limit ourselves, and sometimes we drop out of school. So a couple things. One is there's a lot of help out there for Hispanic business owners and Hispanic female business owners specifically. So whoever's there, and I'm not trying to focus on one segment or the other, but do leverage that and take opportunity. My name is Frederick John Heder, as non-Hispanic as it gets, but 95% of my personal world is Hispanic or some sort of other minority or a blend. The reality is multicultural business acumen, I believe, is one of the most critical things that we need to incorporate in all education, to not to understand the details of every single segment, but be aware that we're different. And it's like a salad. We're not put in a blender and all mixed in. It's like a salad where each one is unique and different within the salad, but all together it tastes good. And so when I think about the culture aspect, with me, it was really interesting. To date, it's very interesting because most people that are insured with me, a lot of clients don't know me. I have a team of about 5 team members, all except one are bilingual. And most of my clients, when I speak to them, they're blown away that I speak in Spanish to them. And it's like peeling an onion, and you go deep fast. So that part has been a great opportunity, but more importantly, it's helping that segment of our society that is significantly underserved. And when you have someone like the professionals that are here that have that understanding of the cultures, you're able to grab customers or consumers that are here and get them to that next level. And in turn, that'll influence their children and their relatives. And overall, as a group, we start shifting up, right? So, because that's the intent. I think most people that have migrated to this country is to increase and or get better and have a better opportunities for our next generation. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Fred. I'm sure that happens with you too, George. People that are looking to buy a house, they want to talk to somebody in Spanish sometimes because they don't understand a lot of the paperwork, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the culture or the language itself, the clients in itself, they gravitate towards the same language, obviously. And I think that's something that we definitely leverage on. But that's also a huge responsibility on our part as well, because these clients are entrusting us, right? We are the professionals, right? And they trust us automatically per se. So it's our responsibility to make sure that that we take care of that client, because that client, the most important thing is they're going to refer you to somebody else. And I think in any industry, right, whether it's this consulting business or that consulting business, that client will end up referring you to somebody else. And being in this industry, for example, where I'm at, I'm in the real estate and loan business, I realized that a referral is pretty much a done client. I mean, a client that's going to be working with you no matter what, as opposed to me looking, I can make 1 million flyers, glossy, huge flyers, and pass them out to 1 million people. And I'll actually get phone calls, but those phone calls are always cold and short and brisk and sometimes even rude. And they're just shopping me for a rate or shopping me for some type of referral back to them, whatever it's going to be. As opposed to when someone refers me, because whether I speak the language or it's the same culture, what have you, you'll start noticing that's an automatic sale, if you want to call it that. Because again, as entrepreneurship, as an entrepreneur, we're going to be in sales no matter what we do. So it is a huge responsibility. And I think to be able to leverage off that is huge. But also at the same time, not to limit us only on our own specific cultural language. Because I think that's something that I started doing. When I started working, of course, I automatically gravitated towards the same culture, same language. But I noticed that I wasn't, I purposely was deviating from other cultures or other languages or what have you. So I try to open up that scope a little bit. And honestly, it's the best of both worlds. To be able to take advantage of that and leverage off that is huge for anybody's business.
I remember the first time I went to Europe, and I started, hearing a lot of people speak many languages. And I kept saying, they give us a hard time for speaking Spanish when in Europe, they speak like 3 or 4 languages at the same time. It took me a long time to realize that it is an asset. It is something that we should capitalize on, that we should cherish and use it, for our success. Again, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask this question, if you can answer it, fairly quickly. What are some of the things that business owners need to do to improve their probabilities of success? So in other words, if you could give 2 or 3 tips on how to succeed in business. Marilu, I'm going to go to you. Which ones would those be?
I will say take always the risk, but take the time to figure if it's working or not. And always try to renovate yourself, because time is changing. And if you don't renovate, then there's going to be somebody else with new ideas, new technologies, and then you're no longer part of the market.
I always say take educated risks.
Yes.
Do the research. Spend time in taking a class or taking a certification here or there. Find out if it makes sense before you take the risk. Don't just go, like they say, como el borolas, no? Like, a ver qué pasa, like, see what happens. No. Do an educated risk. Fred, what about you?
Mentorship, I think, is one of the biggest ones. There's always people that are willing to help. And if you start getting involved in chamber of commerces, I would focus on the business owners that go and carve personal time, not necessarily the people that are paid by the nonprofit, but people that actually do it at their full expense. And as hard as it is, if you can establish a relationship with someone that is sacrificing their time and money to attend these things, then there's probably a chance that they're willing to sacrifice some of that to help you. So mentorship is one of them. The other part is really, if you're married, or be very clear in communicating what's here as best as you can with them, so you have buy-in. And when it's 11 o'clock at night and you're grinding on the computer on the phone, not that they accept it, but not that they agree with it, but they accept it and they understand it. Because if you communicate the why on things, the what is not as important, right? People can figure out the what, so long as there's a clear why you're doing what you're doing. So mentorship, be very open in communicating with those around you. And I don't know, there's a few other things. I think the word adaptability, which I think goes in hand with renovating. So one of the things that was brought up here is how have we handled COVID? And I know we don't have the time, but I had to adapt. So here I have an office with 5 employees, and I had to pretty much shut down my office, set up infrastructure in their homes, and make it as seamless as possible. So when a client had an auto accident, we were able to take care of them, and they felt that they were still connected to us. So that was very tough for us. We had a personal issue with it, right? We have our space, we have our way we do things. And so adaptability, I think, is the other one. So those 3. The word, repeat the word adaptability, mentorship, and clear communication with your loved ones.
Thank you, Fred. George?
I got 3 simple ones. Number 1, for some of you may seem a little corny, but it works. It's having integrity and work ethic. When I started out 20 years ago, I never realized how your work ethic or integrity will follow you over 2 decades. And clients that I've helped 20 years ago have referred me literally dozens of their family and whatnot, and family or friends, professionals, what have you. And that's just because they start trusting you because of that work ethic. So the work ethic follows you, whether you realize it or not. And that applies to a bad work ethic or a good work ethic. And I've had clients that literally entrust me with everything, right? They just say, you know what, figure it out. I trust you. And that's a lot of responsibility, but they trust me because they know I'm gonna take care of the best interest. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would definitely recommend when you start a business, actually before you start a business, work on your credit. Credit, you guys, will follow you for the rest of your life. So for those of you who have an opportunity right now, today, to start working on your credit, take care of that debt. Do not get into these into a cycle of just not worrying about what your credit score is going to be like, because that credit score will ultimately save you in many, many situations. And number 3, I think the last one is kind of goes with credit, is understand, and I think the professor mentioned a little while ago, understand basic accounting. You don't have to be a calculus professor, but understand, like Fred mentioned earlier as well, basic accounting and how it evolves around taxes as well. When you're a wage earner and you're working for a company and they're giving you a W-2, your taxes are getting taken out every single paycheck. When you're self-employed, everything changes. So as long as you understand the basic accounting skills, and then from that, start venturing into learning about what an S corporation is, what a C corporation is, what an LLC is, and how that plays a role and how you're going to form a company, you'll definitely be able to succeed in that regard.
So one of the classes that I teach is Introduction to Entrepreneurship. And those are some of the things that I say, like, you don't have to be an accountant, but you have to understand how a P&L works, how a profit and loss works, the importance of a cash flow statement. Or, again, you don't have to be a marketing specialist, but, do know what is the best advertising channel for your type of business. If your clients are millennials and Gen Zers, then you're probably not going to do too well if you advertise in a newspaper, right? I don't even know if there's newspapers but anymore. But things like that. So for those of you on this video conference, and if you haven't taken that class, I mean, that's a great class that sort of teaches you how to write a business plan and sort of look at every single area from a basic type of view, and then it helps you write a business plan, and it lets you know if it makes sense to do the business or not, because the business plan can tell you that it doesn't make sense to do that business. Anyways, so I want to get into the questions, because we only have like 10 minutes left, and thank you all for your answers. I mean, those are very insightful. I really appreciate it. One of the first questions came to Marilu. It says, what does interior design consist of? And what do you do as an interior designer? Could you tie in graphic design with interior design? What's your answer, Maria?
Not graphic design. Interior design is more like interior architecture. You define the spaces and focus on the interior of the house. You do the space planning, you select colors, layouts, furniture, accommodation, and you also make custom designs. Like if you want to design a kitchen, if you want to make a custom made built-in in commercial, if you're going to design a lobby, if you want to, how do you want to do the reception, but you also need to follow all the building codes. So it is literally like architecture, but focusing yourself on the interior.
So that it looks nice.
So it looks nice and pretty.
There was another question for George, but I think we answered it already. It says, what's the opposite of wage earner? I would say self-employed.
Self-employed, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I may use terms that you guys have never heard. A wage earner pretty much is somebody who gets paid by their company, right? And they get paid for their time, for their weight, and they get paid a wage. In the lending industry, the opposite of that would be someone who's an entrepreneur or self-employed, which is the same.
And again, I mean, I want to echo what George said too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, and Fred too said this, I think, there's nothing wrong with working for a company. I mean, I personally know people that work for companies and make $500,000 a year. But again, it's just a different, I mean, it's just a different route. As a self-employed individual, you sort of call your own shots, and sometimes you have more probabilities of getting up there when it comes to wages than being in a company, because it takes years to be promoted and it takes years to become an executive, which is, again, not impossible, but it just takes a long time and it's a different type of lifestyle. Fred, one of the questions said, you mentioned resources for female Hispanics. Can you share more about that? Do you know any?
I would say Google it. But bottom line, if the ownership, I believe, is over 51%, things are just easier in financing and all that. I don't have a lot of information. I'm not a female. So I just know about it. And actually, I know about it because of being in various chambers and hearing the programs from the people that provide it. I'll tell you this, if we were to pursue another business, it would definitely be under my wife's name. 100%. That I can tell you, I know that. And at that point, I would do more research. I want to tag on something you said about the executive world, though, and how hard it is. So I was a State Farm agent, self-employed for 8 years, and then I became an executive for State Farm for 5 years. And I became a State Farm agent again. So I kind of did the whole thing of the promotion. And as an executive, I made a boatload of W-2 money, back to wage earner. Made a lot of money, all the perks, the nice suits, steakhouses for free. But that entrepreneurship, I did that for 5 years. I wanted out within a year, but I had to figure out how to get out and be able to come back to San Diego. And so it took me a few years to do that, but I was an executive and I did enjoy it. I mean, it's kind of nice to wear the nice suit and have the corporate credit card and obviously retirement. There's a lot of good stuff to it. It's just one of those things, either it's in you or it's not. And, I started that in my early 30s and I got out by my late 30s, and I realized that just wasn't for me. So even if you do become an entrepreneur, and maybe, sometimes there are opportunities to become an executive if you've had a lot of success on the entrepreneur side, right? Because nobody wants to make an executive someone who's not been a good business owner. But, you never know. Things change. So at one point I thought that I wanted to be an executive with a fancy car and fly all over the country, and it really got to me. I wasn't able to spend time with my family. Talking about calls on a Sunday, I sometimes had to meet with people that I had to terminate. It was just too much, time consuming, and I ended up managing around 500 people. So it's like 500 kids, and that just wasn't for me. So yeah, something to think about. You never know what being a successful entrepreneur where it may lead you at one point or another in life, and you just want to be open to options. And the good thing is, you look at these options, you give it a shot, and if it's not for you, most of the time you come back to what, if you were a success before, you're gonna be a success after.
And one of the things that I truly admire about you, Fred, is that, and I've known you for a few years as well, is that you're flexible, right? I mean, if they tell you go to Fresno, you go to Fresno.
Yeah.
When I had a restaurant, I had a restaurant bar for about 5 years. When I looked into opening a franchise, Pollo Loco. And I love Pollo Loco. I think it's a good concept or whatever. But I looked into it, and one of the things that they required was for me to move. Like, there's no room here in California for more Pollo Locos. So that's kind of one of the first things. I mean, I talked to my wife, and she automatically said, no, I'm not moving. But, you know, it's part of being a self-employed individual. You got to be flexible. George, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mentioned one thing. Also, I think the difference between working for a company and working for yourself, some people need acknowledgement from somebody else. Some people need the awards and the plaques or whatnot, right? The good jobs. And that's nice and it feels good at the moment. But when you realize what you're giving up for that acknowledgement or the plaque or the award or whatever, because I think all of us here at one point or another have probably gotten a little award or a plaque and we all feel good about it. But when you realize that there is so much more value in being an entrepreneur and not needing that. I mean, in the beginning of our careers, it's probably good. But as we evolve and as we grow, we start realizing that we don't need the plaques behind our desk or whatever. We don't need the pat on the backs. I motivate myself. You don't need someone to motivate you. And that's the way it has to be. And I think that's one of the key differences there. And I think once we're able to get past that, then you'll be able to do whatever you want.
Yeah, and we talk about it in school. There's really 4 motivators out there. Some people get motivated with money, which is a lot of, what entrepreneurs, what you guys are currently doing. Some people are motivated by recognition, which is, like you said, the awards, the pat on the back. Some people are motivated by power. We only have to look at our president, right? And look at other people that are politicians, that are police. And other people are motivated by status. So you really have to look at yourself and see, okay, what motivates me? What's gonna, and again, nothing wrong with working for a company. There's endless possibilities if you work for a company as well. But this is just another route to see if it fits your lifestyle. We're getting close to 11. Make sure for those of you on the video conference to complete that survey. It's very important for us. They're also giving away a Visa gift card if you complete the card. Well, with that, guys, I wanted to thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I know time is money for you, and I really appreciated that you spent 1 hour with me and with our students. I think it's important, again, to communicate your struggles, communicate why you're in it, why you're in business and so forth. So thank you guys very much again, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Sean, anything else? Are we fine?
No, I think we're all good. Again, as a reminder, just complete that survey if you can. Again, there is an opportunity drawing for a Visa gift card, so free money for students, so that's always exciting. And again, I just want to echo Professor Landeros. Thank you to our panelists for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here today. Your advice was incredible for our students to hear, so we really appreciate that. And then lastly, we are recording this, so we'll have the recording available on the Work-Based Learning website as well as our YouTube channel, so we can share that out if you would like to view it again.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Just a reminder,
Thank you.
also, if you guys can sign in, everybody who attended.
Oh, I'm sorry, Raul, you had something to say?
Oh, I was just telling the students, reminding everybody to make sure to sign in.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you,
Have a good
guys.
week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Eddie. That was great.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, pretty good conversation. I love it.
Yeah, that was awesome. So I did record it. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that the recording will go to you since it's your account.
Yes.
So whenever you get that, if you can share that with